I have always believed that the first day of school is something that stays with you forever. For most people, it's a memory filled with nervous smiles, new backpacks, and the smell of freshly sharpened pencils. But for me, my very first day of school has followed me like a shadow for decades. It is not a pleasant memory. It is not a story I tell with nostalgia. It is a story I have tried to bury, yet every September it claws its way back into my mind. I was 6 years old in 1998. My parents had been preparing me for weeks, buying me new shoes, a crisp white shirt, and a backpack that looked far too big on my shoulders. On the morning of September 1st, the air was still warm from summer, yet the streets smelled faintly of fallen leaves. I remember holding my mother's hand tightly as we approached the large brick school building. From the outside, it looked normal enough. A playground with faded paint on the swings, windows lined in rows, and dozens of kids with ribbons in their hair or neat ties around their necks. But the moment I crossed the threshold of the building, something felt wrong. The air grew colder, thicker, and I swear it smelled of dust, chalk, and something sour, like old books left in a damp basement. I squeezed my mother's hand harder. "I don't want to stay here," I whispered. She gave me a quick, encouraging smile, but her eyes flickered with something else. Hesitation, maybe. Still, she kissed me on the forehead and left me in the care of my new teacher. The hallways were wide but dimly lit, with tall windows covered in streaks that barely allowed sunlight to pass through. The walls were painted a dull yellow, cracked in some places, revealing layers of older paint beneath. We were led to our classroom, a square room with small wooden desks lined in neat rows. The chalkboard at the front was covered in math problems from a previous year, not yet erased. I sat in the second row, nervous, clutching the strap of my backpack. The teacher, a round, middle-aged woman with round glasses, welcomed us warmly, though her smile seemed tired. Children whispered and fidgeted in their seats. Everyone was new, excited and nervous, except one boy. He sat in the far corner, near the window. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his black hair hung low over his forehead. Unlike the rest of us, he didn't whisper, didn't smile, didn't even fidget. He sat perfectly still, staring straight at me. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I turned away quickly, but when I glanced back, his eyes hadn't moved. He was still staring. When the lesson began, the teacher called on several students to introduce themselves. One by one, children stood and spoke their names. But when she reached the corner desk, she skipped it entirely, moving on as if no one was sitting there. I glanced around the room, expecting someone else to notice him, but the other kids were busy giggling and whispering. The pale boy leaned forward slightly, and I saw his lips curve into the faintest smile. At recess, I gathered the courage to approach him, but when I turned toward his desk, it was empty. The chair was pushed neatly under the table, and there was no trace of him. Confused, I asked the teacher where he had gone. She frowned, looking at me as though I had said something strange. "What boy?" she asked. "The one in the corner," I insisted, pointing directly at the empty desk. Her expression hardened. "There is no student assigned to that desk," she said firmly, and then told me to stop making up stories. I didn't understand. I knew what I had seen. The boy had been staring at me all morning, yet nobody else seemed to notice him. When we returned from recess, the desk was no longer empty. The boy was back, sitting exactly where he had been before, his pale face turned toward me, his eyes locked on mine. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Nobody else reacted. Nobody even glanced his way. And for the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched.
The hours dragged on. I tried to focus on the teacher's voice, on the scratching of chalk across the board, but my attention always drifted back to the corner. Sometimes the boy's head was lowered, as if he were writing something, but when I blinked, his notebook was empty. Other times I thought I saw his lips move, like he was whispering, but there was no sound. When lunch came, the other kids laughed and shared snacks. I sat with a group near the window, but I couldn't eat. The boy in the corner hadn't joined us. Instead, he sat alone, eyes still fixed on me. I whispered to the boy sitting next to me, asking if he noticed anything strange. He gave me a confused look and asked, "Who are you talking about?" I pointed again. His face paled, but instead of answering, he quickly changed the subject and wouldn't look at me again. That afternoon, our teacher announced we would be taking a tour of the school. She lined us up 2 by 2, herding us like sheep into the hallway. The air was cooler now, the light outside fading as clouds gathered. The building creaked with every step as though it was breathing. We walked past the gymnasium, where faded basketball lines marked the wooden floor. We peeked into the library, shelves full of dusty, outdated books. The further we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Finally, the teacher led us to a staircase at the end of the hall. Narrow, steep, and dimly lit, it descended into the basement. The air that drifted up smelled damp, like rust and mildew. I felt my stomach twist. One by one, we began to descend. The lights above flickered, buzzing faintly. My hand clung to the cold metal railing as I moved carefully down the steps. That's when I heard it. My name, whispered, low and cold. I froze, glancing over my shoulder. The pale boy stood 2 steps behind me, though he hadn't been in line. His lips moved again, whispering my name, softer this time. "Don't go down there." His voice was not like a child's. It was older, deeper, heavy with something I couldn't understand. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. The other children filed past me, not acknowledging him. The teacher tugged my shoulder, urging me forward, and I stumbled down the steps. At the bottom of the staircase, the boy was gone, but his warning echoed in my mind. The basement was cold and damp, with peeling paint and pipes running across the ceiling. The faint smell of smoke lingered in the air, though I didn't understand why. The teacher explained that the space was sometimes used for storage or drills, but I barely listened. My eyes scanned every shadow, expecting the boy to appear again. When we returned to the classroom, I tried to act normal. I laughed when the other kids laughed. I raised my hand when asked a question, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. That night, at home, I told my parents what had happened. My father dismissed it immediately. "You've got an overactive imagination," he said, ruffling my hair. "New schools can be scary, that's all." But my mother's reaction was different. She listened quietly, her face pale, her lips pressed tightly together. When I finished, she told me not to think about it, not to tell anyone else. But I could see something in her eyes. Fear. Years later, she admitted the truth. There had been a tragedy in that school in the 1970s, a fire drill gone wrong. A young boy had been trapped in the basement and never made it out.
After that day, I never sat comfortably in that classroom again. Every morning, I dreaded walking past the corner desk. Sometimes it was empty, sometimes it wasn't, but whether or not he appeared, I always felt his presence. The weeks blurred together. Teachers gave lessons, children laughed, seasons changed. Yet every so often I would glance toward the window and see him there, silent, pale, eyes fixed on me. One afternoon, during a math lesson, my pencil rolled off the desk. I bent to pick it up, and when I sat upright again, he was suddenly closer. Not in his desk, but standing at the end of my row, only a few feet away. His face was blank, expressionless. None of the other children noticed. My breath caught in my throat. Before I could cry out, the classroom door opened and the principal entered. In that instant, the boy was gone again. I told myself it was my imagination. I told myself ghosts weren't real, but deep down, I knew what I had seen. The last time I saw him was late in autumn, when the days grew short and the air outside smelled of burning leaves. Our class was practicing another fire drill, the echo of alarms ringing through the halls. We lined up, moving quickly toward the exit. I tried to keep my eyes forward, but something drew my gaze to the staircase leading down to the basement. And there he was, standing at the top of the stairs, his black hair hanging over his face, his hand raised as though warning me. His lips moved again, forming words I couldn't hear over the shrill alarm. Then, just as suddenly, the alarms stopped. The hallway filled with silence, and he was gone. I never saw him again after that day. Not in the classroom, not in the halls, not in my dreams, but every September, when the air smells of chalk and fallen leaves, I remember his pale face, his hollow eyes, and the sound of his voice whispering my name. It was my first day of school, and it was the day I learned that some classrooms never forget the children who once sat inside them.